In this edition, we're travelling to Southeast Asia and one of the world's great biodiversity hotspots, the Philippines, in search of surprising and fascinating stories of endangered foods, including a unique marine species found in only one place on Earth.
We have a small fish found in the lake of Taal, where there's a volcano.
Taal is just south of Manila. And in 1754, an eruption from a nearby volcano was so violent and so prolonged that lava flowed for 6 months. Where there had once been a bay that faced out to the South China Sea, a barrier of molten rock created an enclosed lake. And over centuries, the trapped water changed from being salty to sweet.
It is a freshwater lake that used to be part of the ocean, and the fish got entrapped in this lake.
The fish, 15 centimetres long, scientific name Sardinella torvalis, is the only known freshwater sardine found anywhere in the world, all the result of an explosive geological event in the Philippines 300 years ago.
And to this day, that fish is only found in Taal Lake. And people go to have this fish because it's found nowhere else.
Meanwhile, north of Manila, on one of the 7,641 islands that make up the Philippines, is some of Southeast Asia's last remaining ancient rainforest, remote places inhabited by indigenous communities.
It's like Amazon forest. Our community have knowledge of what birds are here, what reptiles, what tree species are here, and we have our own local terms for this.
And growing inside this forest, in the central Cordillera, is a surprising legacy of colonialism. In the 1560s, 300 years of Spanish rule began, an era in which they introduced crops new to the Philippines, including coffee. Some of these coffee plants were adopted by indigenous people and grown within forests so remote they became home of some of the oldest known cultivated coffee varieties in the world, long extinct elsewhere.
This is the typica that was brought to us by the Spaniards, the original variety.
In previous programs, we've reported on how the future of much of our food depends on the planet's biodiversity. But we've also seen how, at the same time, the way we're producing food can also be the main driver of biodiversity loss. It's as if we're caught in a destructive loop, one that's damaging to the planet and damaging to us. Much of this biodiversity loss is happening in Southeast Asia and the Philippines, a region also impacted by climate change. This was late 2025.
A super typhoon has made landfall in the Philippines. Known as Feng Huang, the typhoon crossed the coastline in the country's north at 9:10 in the evening. Local
a few weeks after a super typhoon hit the Philippines, I travelled there, and right in the centre of the archipelago on the Negros Islands, I met a city councillor focused on the future of food, Ang.
We are so used to typhoons. You know, the typhoons are named alphabetically, right? Every year, we finish the whole alphabet in naming our typhoons.
That
many. So we're so used to it, you know, we live with it. But the last two ones, Typhoon Tino and Uwan, were really devastating, unprecedented. I don't know, I am already in my 50s. I have never experienced something like that. The damage was monumental.
What was the impact on farms?
Oh, the farms were obliterated. The estimates are staggering.
And the fishermen probably lost boats?
They lost their boats, and of course they couldn't fish for a long period of time, so government have to support them to provide food not only for their family but for us to consume. So we have to help them rebuild their boats for fishing.
Filipino politician Ang. In this programme, we're going to be hearing from people in the Philippines responding to these challenges, people fighting to save food traditions, biodiversity, and trying to build a future food system that can adapt to a changing world. A few months ago, many of them gathered together, farmers, food producers, scientists and politicians, including Ang, for an event on the Negros Islands. And helping me collect their stories was the food journalist and broadcaster Dany Mitzman. And Dany, this was an event called Terra Madre Asia and Pacific, and it's worth explaining that the original version of Terra Madre was held in Italy by the slow food movement there almost 30 years ago.
Hi Dan, good to talk to you again. So, Terra Madre is a network of food communities, so farmers, fishers, chefs, academics, indigenous communities, policymakers, anyone who's interested in food traditions and agro-biodiversity all over the world. So originating in Italy, they now do Terra Madres all over the world, but this is the first time that they've had an Asia and Pacific one, and it was in the Philippines.
And I mentioned it was held in the Negros Island, right in the centre of the Philippines, which, going from north to south, is a chain of islands stretching for over 1,000 miles.
Yes, I knew it was an archipelago, but I didn't actually find out until I got there that the Philippines has over 7,600 islands, although they say only a couple of thousand are inhabited. The country's roughly divided into 3 horizontal sections. So just to give listeners a mental picture, you've got Luzon at the top, which is a huge island, and that's where the capital Manila is. Then there are the Visayas, which is the middle section, and that includes Negros, where we were. And then the bottom section is Mindanao. And we met some indigenous communities who told us about local foods that are unique to their region or island or even to their village. And another thing that surprised me was the linguistic diversity, because I always thought everyone in the Philippines spoke Tagalog, but a lot of them speak local languages and dialects. And thanks to 50 years of American colonial rule, which was in the first half of the 20th century, almost everyone speaks English. So I guess that was lucky for us. But of course, as well as linguistically, colonial influences on Filipino food culture have been massive.
Well, let me just run through some of the main influences. Over thousands of years, there's been maritime trade with China, India and Malay. That was based around rice, tubers, chicken, fish and coconut. Then 3 centuries of Spanish rule, which ran between 1565 to 1898, including the galleon trade, which introduced maize, potato, peanuts, tomato, cacao and coffee, followed by the American rule, which you mentioned. That ran from 1889 until 1946, which introduced processed and canned goods, including condensed milk and corned beef. And all of this adds up to present-day Filipino food culture. And Terra Madre brought many of these influences together in one place.
Yeah, if you think of Terra Madre as a sort of combination of a giant food market, but also a place to showcase some of the world's most endangered foods. So we had the chance to explore all sorts of things, from a flatbread called piaya, which is made with muscovado sugar, to fermented clams I tasted with spicy vinegar, and then rice pouches made with nipa palm leaves, all sorts of really incredible produce.
The Philippines is also famed for its native breeds of chicken, and Dany, you met up with a food expert at the market, Erica Urquiaga, and you tasted a local speciality, chicken inasal.
So chicken inasal, it's chicken barbecue, but what makes the Bacolod one special is in the flavoring. So it's all in the flavoring. Like you see how he's just putting it on the flavoring there?
It's the best chicken in the world. You have to try it.
And see what, can I tell her what the
please,
other thing you've got? So that's the chicken inasal, so that's the leg part. And that is?
That's isol, so that's like the tail or
chicken
the butt.
Chicken butt.
Yeah, it's chicken butt.
It's amazing. It's fattier. It's more full of flavor than the other parts. And people fight for it because it only has one, right?
Yeah, I think I will have to try it. I would say anything else, like the sauces, are they special?
Yeah, so it comes with calamansi, which you can squeeze with your toyo, which is soy sauce. And then you also have suka or vinegar. And then inasal comes with chicken oil, which is like the drippings of the chicken, if I'm not mistaken.
And it's red because there's the anato, the achuete. It's mainly for color.
Yeah.
And you put that all over the rice.
So you make red rice.
Exactly.
Red rice.
Red, oily rice. Wonderful.
Red rice and chicken butt.
Exactly. What more do you need, right?
What I think makes the Filipino love of chicken so fascinating is the region's links to the origin story of the chicken. The bird's domestication has been traced back to Southeast Asia. And around 3,000 years ago, the Philippines was the hub from which the chicken as food began its journey around the world. So no surprise, Filipinos have a deep connection with chicken and their native breeds and dishes such as that barbecued inasal.
Do you know, I didn't know anything about that, Dan, so thank you. But there were loads of things that I discovered as well at the market. Erica also pointed out various Filipino fruits like calamansi. It looks like a baby lime, but tastes more similar to a clementine, and I thought it was really, really lovely. And there were actually lots of interesting citrus fruits, and Negros Occidental has one you can't find anywhere else in the Philippines. It's called batuan.
So this is the one that's unique to Negros. That's the souring agent fruit that they use in savory. They have a signature dish here, which is, it's like beef broth. So the beef broth thing, you can find it all over the Philippines, but what makes the one here unique is this one, that souring agent. Never had it as an actual fruit, so if you want to try it.
Can you eat it as a fruit?
Oh, you can eat.
Thank you. Very citric. Really interesting, this.
And apparently the sour beef broth is an excellent hangover cure.
Which is good to know, as we'll be exploring Filipino drinking culture in a few minutes. But Dany, I think the most visually spectacular food we saw in the market at Terra Madre, perhaps surprisingly, were the different types of salt, all made using ancient production techniques. One's called asin tibuak, and it's referred to as a dinosaur egg because of its shape and size. A couple of decades ago, 200 families made it. Now there are only 4.
It's actually the only salt with a GI status, that's geographical indication, and it's in the Ark of Taste,
which is the global catalogue of the world's most endangered foods.
It's also just been given intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding status by UNESCO.
And there was another salt which you got to taste, and it looked as if it was formed from the roof of a cave over thousands of years. It looked stunning.
It's like a stalactite. That's the entire salt.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It weighs 5 kilos per salt. They let it drip, the cold cooked salt water.
So it drips down the pole, and then it hardens around it.
Yes, look at the texture. It's like cloud.
Yeah, it does look like clouds. And does it have any particular flavour?
Yes, you can try actually.
I think I should.
Yes.
You just broke off a little piece and crumbled it into my hand. Thank you.
So it has a different texture.
Oh, it's super crunchy. Wow. Very explosive. My mouth is tingling.
But what really, really struck me with all of these different salts that I tried was not so much how they tasted, but what they symbolised. So they were about disappearing skills, they were about diversity and community, and I felt that all the producers were really determined to preserve the traditions and pass them on to future generations.
Well, I came across a story at the market which also captured that determination, and it's a coffee story. It comes from Luzon in the north, far above Manila in the central Cordillera region. It's very remote and it's home to a number of different indigenous communities.
Yeah, so I'm Daniel. I'm also called Kumafor, and I'm part of the remote Lias tribe in the northern part of the Philippines, which hosts one of the country's last remaining old-growth forests, and is home to the critically endangered Philippine eagle, the largest eagle in the world, and also the largest flower species called Rafflesia, and one of the tallest tropical species called Almasiga.
So where Daniel lives, there's still forest which has never been cleared, and he's part of a community of around 3,000 people who are spread out in this forest region. And many, in fact, depend on the forest for their food, including wild boar, deer, bird species and reptiles, and they also forage for seasonal fruits and vegetables. Centuries ago, however, the Spanish introduced coffee in the lowland areas. But Daniel's ancestors took it deeper and also higher up into the forests. And it results in a special coffee because we know that Arabica coffee comes from Ethiopia and was then traded around the world from Yemen. From there, the Spanish introduced it to the Philippines almost 300 years ago. And cut off from the outside world, in Daniel's community is some of the original coffee that travelled out of Ethiopia through Yemen before it arrived in places like Brazil and ended up being bred to become modern coffee. So it's almost like a time capsule of caffeine.
That's why we take pride in that, because we planted the coffee that was originally introduced from Ethiopia, and then from Ethiopia then to Yemen. Yeah. So it's the original breed of Typica Arabica, and that's why we also consider it heirloom to our community.
And Dany, you probably sense this as well in the Philippines, how important coffee is. This is a part of the world that gave us tea, Camellia sinensis from nearby China, and yet because of the colonial history of the Philippines, they have one of the strongest coffee cultures in the world.
Every time there's coffee, it means a social gathering wherein they talk about community affairs, political affairs, social life, even tribal wars, how to address conflicts with other tribes with coffee.
Are there conflicts with other tribes?
Yes. Prior to the arrival of the Spaniards, headhunting was actually a very common practice.
So fortunately, gathering around coffee is how they resolve disputes today. But there are now two problems Daniel's community is dealing with. One is that their coffee culture is changing.
The people shifted to cash crops. We call it cash crops, like a vegetable, because they can easily make money out of that, and even citrus production. And so they slowly cleared or cut away their coffee trees.
So some of these original heirloom coffees became endangered.
Most of these original that are more than 100 years old were cut down.
What were people drinking instead of the coffee?
Instant coffee, soft drinks, sugary drinks, yeah.
The second problem is their ancient forest is under threat. There are plans to build a road all the way through a section of forest. Some in the community see this as an opportunity for economic development. Others see it as a disaster for the ecosystem. Daniel, however, believes that by integrating coffee into the forest, there is a different approach.
We thought of coffee because we have already been doing this in the past, and I came to learn that coffee is growing under the rainforest of Ethiopia. By default, it's a forest species, and we just had to reintroduce or reintegrate that kind of model in our community.
And so on the margins of the ancient intact forest, they're recreating the biodiversity of the coffee forests in Ethiopia and developing a complex system in which food production and nature can coexist.
Because we are mostly planting in areas that are already disturbed. So essentially, planting coffee, planting traditional food crops, and native trees to mimic the rainforest. So essentially, we are creating a food forest at the same time.
And so now there's a growing number of people in the community becoming forest coffee growers, mostly young people, which is also slowing a migration from this area to the big cities, including Manila.
So it's our goal that as we engage more young people, we see more of our mountains restored and more of our forests and biodiversity protected.
Well, let's turn from coffee to cacao and chocolate, but staying with this idea of edible biodiversity, you came across a fascinating story that also takes in the colonial history of the Philippines.
Yes, I'm holding in my hand a very special piece of chocolate which was given to me by a Filipino farmer called Christopher Fadriga, who in a kind of fairy tale-like fashion discovered his precious criollo cacao beans by chance.
And just to explain, criollo cacao are some of the earliest types of cacao we know of, which originate in Central America, can often be white or ivory in colour, and they've always been prized because unlike other types of cacao turned into chocolate either as a drink or a bar of chocolate, they don't have any bitterness. They're delicate tasting. And this is the type of cacao the farmer you met, Dany, Christopher, discovered in the Philippines.
Yes, and in the most unexpected way, because his background had nothing to do with chocolate.
I had no knowledge about cacao. About 10 years ago, I was more of a natural farmer. I was growing vegetables.
So Chris, as he likes to be known, he'd never considered cultivating cacao until one of his clients recommended he should have a go at it. And he sent Chris down to the south to a cacao seminar in Davao on the island of Mindanao. If you remember, that's the lowest section. And it's where 80% of the country's cacao is grown, and it's considered basically the Philippines' finest chocolate. So he went there, and then when he got back, he started doing his own research on the internet.
And that's where I found out that the Philippines was the first country to receive cacao outside of the Mesoamerican area. These are cultivars that came from Mexico, but the lineage is actually from Venezuela. And they brought it here way back during the galleon trade. When they were colonizing the country, usually the friars would like to drink the secuate or the hot chocolate, and they would bring it wherever they established a community. And over several hundred years, the Philippines was only growing Criollo cacao.
So, as we know, the Philippines are made up of thousands of islands, and they're separated by sea, so cross-pollination is less likely. And Chris realised that a lot of the cacao trees on his island might still be the ancient variety. So once he realised that, he began a painstaking search.
I made it my mission to look for remnants of this old cacao. And what I did, I would go around the province, and if I see an old cacao tree in somebody's backyard, I would ask for a pod.
Chris collected around 20 cultivars of white bean cacao, which he planted in his nursery.
And this became the mother trees of the original plants that I started to propagate.
So fast forward 6 years when a chocolatier friend suggested he enter his beans in a cacao competition. He won the regional heats, he won the national competition, beating even the renowned producers from down south in Davao. And one of the judges actually said she got goosebumps when she saw his beans for the first time and told him that they were going to be a rock star among cacao, which I thought was lovely. So then just a few years of experimental cultivation, and Chris's cacao beans were flying across the world to be judged at the Salon du Chocolat in Paris. They were sent to represent the Philippines at international level, and he won gold. And at the same time, his discoveries reached the ears of a Dr. Wilbert Phillips Mora, who is a Costa Rica-based expert in cacao genetics.
Dr. Wilbert Phillips, he told me, Chris, the Philippines just don't realize it, but that is a national treasure. In fact, that's a world treasure, the Criollo, because it's almost not existing in other places. So I'm glad I am a part of that, and I believe that there is a super Criollo waiting to be discovered in somebody's backyard.
In Latin America, pure Criollo was almost wiped out by a cacao blight in the 1700s. So cacao production there was only saved thanks to cross-pollination, and that produced the Trinitario variety. So like your coffee story, because of colonization, the Philippines became a safe haven for lost food genetics.
Amazing story, Dany, of how this colonial history deposited these genetics in the Philippines, lost in the so-called centre of origin in Central America and rediscovered by Christopher. But I guess the most important question here, Dany, is what does it taste like?
For me, that's always the best bit of interviewing somebody who produces their own chocolate. So I did get a bar. Here is the very last block of it. I'm going to tell you now what it tastes like.
It's a tiny, tiny piece that you've saved, especially for this programme.
Mm-hmm. And I'm enjoying it. It was worth saving it for this programme, because otherwise I wouldn't have any more left. Well, to start with, it has an incredible aroma, but it's, like you said before, no bitterness. So this is 80% creamy. It's got a slight sourness. I actually met a chocolate expert, and she gave me a whole tasting session with some of Christopher's chocolate, and she said that it's like a winey sourness. It's delicious. I'm sorry, Dan, that I can't give you a piece, but I only had this one block left.
Poor me. Okay, well, from rare and endangered, award-winning cacao and chocolate, let's turn to a story of fermentation, drinks and biodiversity.
Alcohol, for a long time, was a coveted source of calories. It was safer.
One of the speakers at the Terra Madre event in the Philippines was the drinks expert and writer Dany Childs. Listeners might remember he's behind a movement called Slow Drinks, which is promoting the idea of saving endangered ingredients by using them in beverages, from cocktails to non-alcoholic concoctions, all based around the idea we've been discussing of conservation through consumption. Use it or lose it.
Drinks are food. Drinks are a part of cuisine, and any ingredient that can be used to make food can be used to make drinks. And even more than that, there are a lot of ingredients that don't work so well as food that can be used to make drinks. Things like roots and barks and maybe leaves that aren't, edible on their own but have flavor. And so we can use drinks to tell stories. We can do drinks to protect ingredients and to protect biodiversity and to protect cultural customs. So drinks are, I like to think of them as a microcosm that tells the story of people, place, process, and plants.
Dany Childs introduced me to a drinks maker based in the Philippines who is attempting to revive a disappearing tradition to save not only a craft but also crop diversity and a landscape, all captured in a sip of delicious drink.
My name is Armand Camhol. I'm from Ifugao province in the northern part of the Philippines. I belong to an indigenous peoples group. We call ourselves the Tuali from Ifugao. I teach in a university, and I'm also trying to engage with our communities to help them realize the value of their culture, of our practices, agroecological practices, rice brewing practices, heirloom rice cultivation before all of them disappears.
Armand's idea is to save rice diversity by giving it a new purpose, and this is where drinks come in. Among the endangered varieties are sticky and glutinous ones, which, by using a mould, can be fermented into a wine, similar to the way sake is made in Japan, and this is what he's teaching members of his community.
I showed them how to inoculate cook glutinous rice with this indigenous yeast.
So, right, which looks like a pebble to me, like it's been broken in half. It looks like a white, stony material.
Like an oval shaped, and then I ground it into powder, and then I spread it all over this cooked sticky rice.
Okay, so you've just revealed inside the basket. It looks like a mass of cooked rice, but there's also an aroma.
I see some like spores and mold growing on there, which is good.
These are these white,
exactly.
White
so that's sign of life. It smells mildly alcoholic and very, very floral and enticing, to be totally honest.
This allows the bacteria and the yeast and the molds to slowly ferment, convert first the starch into sugar and then sugar to alcohol. So that's a slow process. It takes around at least 1 month for you to have good tasting wine. But if you want it to be even stronger, you can go 2 months or more.
And what you end up with is a special, and you could even say sacred drink, because traditional drinking culture in Oman's part of the Philippines is all connected with ritual.
The shamans needed to communicate with the unseen beings. So if you call them, those beings, you have to offer something in return. If there is no alcohol there, they might take you away. The other thing is during weddings, of course, they prepare lots of rice wine for those. And as I observed when I was very young, when I was in the house of my grandparents, when they come home at late afternoon or late evening, around 6, they would first wash their hands and then dip their cups in the jar, in the rice wine jar, and then just drink a cup, and it's like relaxing for them. Yeah. So those are the reasons why we ferment, why we make wine.
Did you try the rice wine?
No, it was way too hot and humid for me most of the time there, so I was not going to go near strong alcohol, but I'd love to know what it was like, Dan.
Well, the sample I tried from Armand was, I'd say, fruity, very smooth, and extremely aromatic.
There is no trace of sourness.
That's really sweet. That's like almost like honeyed.
Yeah.
And this is an endangered flavour now because Armand's parents' generation had access to cheap industrial alcohol, and this meant the slow, fermented and subtle rice wine started to fall out of favour.
It's a huge health problem as well, even in Cordilleras, because we have become accustomed to cheap liquor, and what, like similar to what happened to Native Americans in the United States. We were not drinking liquor every day. We would only drink it like maybe twice or thrice a month.
And so if Armand can motivate more farmers and drinks makers in his project, he gets to achieve two things. One is to reclaim a more traditional and, you could argue, healthier drinks culture. And secondly, if the producers use the traditional grains, he gets to save an important part of Ifugao farming culture. Because the drinks are unique, possibly help them make money.
Making Filipinos aware, making Ifugaos aware of our drinks is a way to preserve and promote the cultivation of the glutinous as well as non-glutinous heirloom rice.
What for you is the non-monetary value of keeping this alive?
When I talk to the elders, they would say, Why are you trying to recall these things? These like my father. Those belong to the past, We have a new world now. You have to adapt to it. And I tell them. But when the stories get deeper, especially with the other elders, community members, when we have long stories, exchange, and when I show them some varieties which have been made extinct in a village, they would say, we used to plant these things, our grandparents used to plant these things, and then you can actually see their eyes light up when we exchange more stories, when we go deeper. So it's like, it is there, like the desire to reclaim their heritage is there, but there needs to be something which will awaken it up or something like that.
What did you make of that, Dany?
Yeah, I loved what Armand was saying when he said that people's eyes were lighting up, because it's something I saw in quite a few people who were there at Terra Madre, that their eyes were lighting up, young people as well, at the idea of these old traditions and rediscovering their food culture and history, and not looking so much towards the international cuisine as being better, the French and the Italian, but actually wanting to discover their own culture and traditions in terms of foods.
Well, I also got a sense of that enthusiasm, that energy for rediscovering Filipino food culture on the outskirts of Bacolod.
Nag-serve na ka mo sa dalom?
This was a visit I made to the ancestral home of a famous Filipino food writer, Doreen Gamboa Fernandez. She passed away 25 years ago, but today young chefs and others interested in food visit her ancestral home to learn more about her work and Filipino food. During her writing career, she explored every part of the Philippines to document its food culture, its history. And when I visited the house, I spoke with her niece, Rina.
If you Google her, you will see how many articles she has written about Filipino food. She relates it to culture, to our culture, and she relates it to the evolution of the different kinds of dishes that we have because of the influences of the Chinese, the Spanish, etc., etc.
What was her background and how did she become a food writer?
That's the funny story. She was a housewife, but her husband was the lover of life. My uncle, he just loved to eat good food. It could be in a small little store, a restaurant by the street. It can be a high-class restaurant. It didn't matter to him. What mattered was the flavor. And after all their stories, they had a friend who was in media, and their friend told him, Willie, why don't you write about your adventures? And he said, I will do the eating, Doreen will do the writing. And Tita Doreen willingly attempted to do so. And before she knew it, she became a popular food writer without her knowing it. And then later on, she wrote a lot of books about food.
It strikes me that one of the biggest puzzles after arriving here, the landscape is complicated. It's an archipelago.
Yes.
Its history is complex. It's
Yes.
had waves of colonialism
Invasions.
as invasions. Yeah. Therefore, I think the question of what is Filipino food is one of the great puzzles.
Yes. For her, I think her theory was everything gets Filipinized. Whatever influence was given to us, it became Filipino somehow. She would relate it to the culture of the place, the resources in the area, and the environment of that area. So she really found that connection. It's not just eating. There is that connection of the culture and the food.
And I asked Rena, why does she think so many young people visit the house and arrive wanting to learn about Filipino food traditions?
I think people now are looking for who they are. The young people are so confused. They don't know who they are anymore because everything's in the internet. So they're confused. So how do you find yourself? How do you ground yourself? You look for your roots. So I noticed even with chefs, with young chefs, they come because they want to look for local ingredients to define who they are. And we're taking advantage of that.
This is part of the roots. We're standing in it now.
Yes.
The house from which so many ideas are captured in writing.
Yes.
And Dany, you actually got to meet some of these chefs.
So Michelin Guide just came to the Philippines last year for the first time. So the first guide is out this year. And I met some of the chefs who'd got stars. One of them was Josh Boutwood, who is a real mix. He's half Filipino, half British. He chose to make Manila his home. His restaurant Helm got 2 stars. And I asked him if he uses exclusively Filipino ingredients.
I call myself a selectionist, not a purist, but 70% of my restaurant is running on local ingredients, be it seafood, also vegetables and chocolates, coffees and everything else like that is all coming from within our 7,600 plus islands. The country is so big, so logistically it's quite challenging, but we're flying down to the south in Mindanao to allocate a partition of a farm that is purely dedicated to growing for us for the restaurant. So that's why we're spending a lot of time here sourcing out loads of different seeds and crops in order for us to bring to the farm so that they can grow it for us.
Are these heritage and heirlooms?
They are heritage and heirlooms, yes. These are things that have been growing for centuries and almost getting lost in industrialization and farming. Now we want to try and make sure that we're able to bring it to the plate so that the guests can enjoy what was enjoyed centuries ago.
And the second chef you met, Dany, was doing an even deeper dive into Filipino food history, delving into the archives to learn about what some of the earliest encounters of the outside world with the Philippines, what they revealed about the way people were eating. Who was that and what's the story?
Yes, he was a lovely young chef called Don Baldosano, who's only 27. He's won the Michelin Young Chef Award and a star for his restaurant, Linamnan, which is a really tiny restaurant. It's just a 12-seater at the back of his house. But what's really fascinating about Don is that he's been looking really deeply into pre-colonial cuisine in the Philippines. So he's been researching somebody called Pigafetta, who was the first writer to talk about Filipino food. And he came over with the explorer Magellan. And when they were invited by the Filipinos to get off the ship and come for a meal, he was the only one who accepted. And he wrote about all of the food that he was offered in a journal. And Don Baldosano has gone back to those original writings.
He was offered 6 courses in 6 different rooms and had a very luxurious meal. So one of the first things was they were given a gift of dorado, which is mahi-mahi, a tub of palm wine, sacks of rice as well. That was the first gifts from Filipinos to Magellan. Filipinos back then were really good fishermen because they were able to catch all these big fish, even though they had really small boats. One of the things that was very interesting for me, though, like going back to the meal, was how they used coconut. One thing that Pigafetta talked about was that we would use coconut how they would use bread in Spain. So he was even talking about like us Spaniards and Italians, we would dip bread in olive oil. The Filipinos would use coconut as like bread. That was his only reference. So for me, it was like, oh shoot, they were using it almost like scarpetta or something that you can use to like rub your meat in or your sauces in. It was a rich food culture essentially. It wasn't just drying meat or having vinegars. It was actually a proper food culture where they actually ate good food. And it says a lot about the culture too. Me growing up in history, all we knew about was like Filipinos were these tribe people. But since now that I cook, I finally discovered these spagafetta things. And I'm like, there's so much more about Filipino food that we need to actually see. And even Filipinos don't know about it. So maybe it's not just us that needs to know about it. Maybe the whole world needs to know about it for us to actually discover that, hey guys, we're actually having something cool in our history.
Chef Don Baldassano there on uncovering pre-colonial foods. Now, the loss of biodiversity matters to us all, including the kind of edible biodiversity we've been hearing about, all the different crops, plants, animals, so-called agro-biodiversity, along with the skills and landscapes that go with them. But I left the Philippines with a sense of optimism. Take that coffee story we heard earlier. In the 20th century alone, the Philippines lost more than 90% of its forest cover. And I know the coffee project we heard about is small, but it's a sign that people are finding innovative ways to produce food and save biodiversity. And I think the chefs that you spoke to are playing an important role in that, pulling these different stories together, making their audiences aware of the issues.
And I think what I found really, really beautiful there was how all of these strings came together at Terra Madre, how the chefs and the local producers, whether they were salt producers or coffee producers or rice, all of those aspects, there were these tiny communities who were learning about each other and connecting with each other to create this support network, which will help them in the future and will certainly have people who will buy those artisanal products. I mean, things that take hours and hours to make. Now there are people who are giving those products value and giving people a sustainable future. So I loved that, and a lot of the young people we met were really, really keen. Your coffee guys, I met them too, and they were so enthusiastic, giving out their cups of coffee to people, and it was such amazing coffee too.
Thank you, Dany Mitzman. Well, maybe we should have a Terra Madre in the UK, a chance to bring people together to celebrate the edible biodiversity of these islands, share knowledge and find ways of saving it for future generations. If it happens one day, we will, of course, let you know.